Chair lays out House Bill 2701 and recognizes Representative Slaton, who I believe replaced the former chairman of this committee in representing, is that right? I'm trying to remember. You replaced the former chairman of this committee?
That may be true, sir.
Well, we appreciate the process. So thank you. Move forward. Tell us about this bill.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to discuss this with you today. For nearly 8 decades, Congress has not made a declaration of war. Even so, America's sons and daughters have been sent overseas to fight on foreign soil. Oftentimes, the Texas National Guard has been called upon by the federal government to go and fight in these conflicts. The Texas legislature has no say over whether or not the active duty military is sent off to fight. But we can exercise our right to defend the men and women of the Texas National Guard and stop them from being sent to fight and sometimes die in unconstitutional wars, regardless of who controls the White House. House Bill 2701 will simply protect the Texas National Guardsmen by prohibiting their deployment into active duty combat without a constitutionally required declaration of war from Congress. House Bill 2701 ensures that the Texas National Guard can still conduct all necessary training, including training overseas, to make sure they're ready for combat if called upon, but protects and respects them by ensuring that they only go to war when Congress fulfills its constitutional duty. The Republican Party platform number 302 says, quote, "The Texas National Guard should only be deployed to overseas combat zones under authorization of Congress through a declaration of war," end quote. The Texas Democrat Party platform says, quote, "Texas Democrats believe peace, prosperity, and national security are best achieved by maintaining a strong national defense. Our policies should prioritize prevention and diplomacy through our State Department, with military action used only as a last resort and authorized only as allowed by our Constitution," end quote. In the packet I've given out, you will find these platform positions, as well as a memorandum from the West Virginia ACLU, which issued an analysis and statement of support of identical legislation in the West Virginia legislature. In their analysis of the West Virginia Defend the Guard Act, the ACLU stated, quote, "The Defend the Guard Act provides an appropriate, lawful vehicle for the West Virginia legislature to pressure the federal government to reestablish the constitutional requirement that only Congress may declare war. I believe that House Bill 2701 will do the same for Texas." There's also, we got back from LBB, there is no fiscal note on this bill. And Mr. Chairman, I would like to reserve the right to close, but otherwise I'm available for questions.
So let me ask, and then I'll see if some other members have any questions, but can you sort of give us a real world example? Like, let's say your bill was already law. It was already law. And had been law for the last 20 or 30 years. Excuse me. Can you give at least me an example of, what would have been different? Where would I guess Texas Guard, National Guard members would not have been deployed, which is I guess what you're trying to do, right?
For only active duty combat. Of course, they could have done all training, could have
but
everything, but as far as active duty?
Yeah, the things that you're trying to change.
Yes.
So I'm saying if your bill was already law and has been for the last 30 years, can you give an example of like, hey, well, back in 2000 and whatever, 2002, 2006, 2000, whatever. Can you give us an example?
So whenever we got involved in Iraqi freedom, and then of course in Afghanistan.
So was that what year was that? Do you remember?
2001, 2002, or January 2002, I guess.
Okay.
When that started.
So it's 2002. It's Iraqi freedom. Go ahead.
The Texas National Guard would not have been deployed to active duty.
So they were deployed in 2002, more or less?
I'm not sure exactly when
let's
they were
say
deployed, but they have been involved.
Right.
And like I say, this bill, regardless of if it would have been if it was in place in the past, and even, of course, in the future, if it's in place, Congress has to declare war, which is what they're required to do in the Constitution.
Well, so do you remember, and if you don't, that's okay. I apologize that I don't, maybe Mr. Tinderholt, he's kind of our parliamentarian on these issues. You know, what year did, because Congress voted on declaring war, right?
Yes, but they
Do
did
you want me to
not.
yield to Mr. Tinderholt?
Sure.
Okay.
He can,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so essentially what would happen is that the Texas National Guard would not deploy in those instances. I think the intent of the bill is really good. I think that the federal government could potentially, even if it passes, the federal government could potentially overreach and force it. I'll tell you this, one of the best units that I deployed that supported me in combat, and I was really surprised, active duty, any active duty out there, you know, we kind of tease the National Guard all the time, we joke about it. And then we had the Texas National Guard in Iraq supporting our MIT team. Literally the best route security, the best helicopter pilots, the best support I've ever had was the Texas National Guard. And it literally kind of poked us in the eye because we didn't expect it. But essentially what I think I've talked with him quite a bit about this, what this bill would say is that unless Congress declares war, the Texas National Guard cannot be used.
But by then, had Congress declared war?
I don't know what year they had declared war. I don't think
the
that
last-
they ever did. To be honest, I don't think they did.
I thought that,
no, the last time we,
well, didn't that's what Hillary Clinton got hit on for voting for war. When she ran for president, Bernie Sanders kept hitting her for voting for war. So they must have declared war. I mean, I can't believe that we don't know, but I guess we don't. Biederman, do you know?
Hey, I agree with you. I remember that. I thought we declared war. That was all they had voted in the Congress about it.
Exactly.
so,
But Mr. Chairman, I think it's really important to note that I think this is the first time he's ever laid out a bill, and there's probably some level of hazing that needs to happen at some point.
Oh, is this your first bill?
yes, sir.
Well, then I should
gonna
be
leave it
asking you more questions, and you should know the answers.
Well,
When
I
did
can tell
Congress
you-
declare war?
I can tell you, we declared war on Japan December 8th, 1941.
Not
We
Japan, I'm
declared
talking
war
about
in
Iraq.
Germany and Italy December 11th, 1941. We declared war on Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania on June 4th, 1942. And that was the last time Congress declared war as they were required to under the Constitution.
With it? Appropriations and what? Tinderholt?
Actually, it was an authorized use of military force is what happened.
Yes,
And that's not war?
that's not war.
Not
So
legally defined.
yours would not cover, so if your bill became law, then they would still not be able to deploy because it was only the authorized use of.
Yes, sir. So the president could continue to do that, and he could use active duty, and he could use other National Guards. But this is a way for Texans to stand up for our fighting men and women here and say, Texas National Guard is the best, and they'll continue to be the best, even if this bill's passed. And they're just saying, if you want to use us, follow the Constitution, is all this bill says.
Hold on,
It just
Mr.
shows
Biederman,
them
Mr.
respect
Biederman?
and the Constitution respect.
Biederman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So really what's happening is we declared war back in World War II, okay? And we did it the right way, through Congress. We went to war with President Bush not the right way. That's why there were so many problems with the whole Clinton and everything else. They supported, they never declared war. Only the Congress can declare war, not the president. But the president had gotten us basically into it. And then Congress allowed funding, but they never declared war. And so what this bill is if Congress is not going to do it right, we're not going to have the obligation to send our men and women into battle. Do it right, and we'll go there and be the best force there is.
That's right.
But that's what this bill's about.
And Mr. Tinderholt?
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I got to be totally honest with you. I've harassed him and told him how horrible this bill is for a couple weeks, but I'm probably going to vote for it. I gave you a hard time for the last 2 weeks.
So I've been hazed the whole time.
Literally, this is the legal way of bringing soldiers to combat. They'll still be able to deploy to other places around the world, just not combat zones, unless a declaration of war is made. This is literally the right way to do
But
it.
they could still be deployed, like, give us an example. You said they could still.
Support operations, say to support nations like when there's hurricane disasters, anytime we're doing training. The Texas National Guard does training in Egypt and another country.
Okay.
They'll still be able to do those types of things. They just won't be able to go conduct war fighting.
So then would, it sounds like a loophole there, because then if you're the president, you move soldiers from here and you send them to combat, and then you send the Guard to fill that hole.
I think the right thing to do is to pass this, but I think what will happen is they'll move them between Title 10 and Title 32 money, and they'll do it anyway. But this is really the right way. This is the way that it should have always been done.
Mr. Lambert? Lambert?
Yes, just a couple of questions. Thank you, Mr. Representative Slaton, and congratulations on your first bill.
Thank you, sir.
The questions I had, how many states, other states, have adopted similar?
No one has adopted this yet. By the end of the year, 31 states will have heard this. This started in West Virginia just a few years ago. This, if you want to call, movement of defending the Guard and forcing the federal government to obey the Constitution. They're clearly not going to fix themselves, and this is an opportunity for each state to stand up for the fighting men and women that are, in some cases, being abused. And
But no states have passed it?
not yet. It's a fairly brand new legislation.
And you mentioned abuse, and you mentioned PTSD, and you mentioned suicide rates. Do you have any data?
Well, I mean, we know there's 22 veterans a day committing suicide. And
But specifically because of this?
well, no, what this bill, mainly what it does is it's just about the Constitution. It's about telling Congress to do their job, telling a president to honor the Constitution, respect the fighting men and women that he's sending into combat, and just do it the right way and declare war. That's what it's about. And then when we choose to go to war as a country, we're all in. Because
Now,
over
let me ask-
50% of the congressmen and women would vote for this, and they would support their congressmen and women that vote to go to war, and we would be all in as a country.
So would there be another avenue or a pathway to accomplish what you're wanting to accomplish by doing more of an HCR for?
Well,
the
it
citizens?
sounds to me like, if I could respond to that, I mean, an HCR would be sort of encouraging Congress. Can't make them do anything. This obviously seems to me would be a much more substantive and bolder move, if you will. Because at that point, if we were to pass it, then to Mr. Tinderholt's point, we'd probably get into it with with the federal government, right?
Constitutionality.
Sure. Well,
Okay.
and I can, there was, just to help you, as far as training and active duty, there was a case, Perpich versus DOD. And in that case, the opinion was narrowly tailored to training only. The Supreme Court held that the National Guard may, quote, be ordered to active federal duty for purposes of training outside the United States without either consent of the state governor or declaration of a national emergency, end quote. Training outside the United States and combat outside the United States are two totally separate issues, and the court never addressed the latter. In Perpich, the Supreme Court intentionally addressed training only and avoided the issue. That protects training. So our National Guard will continue to be the best there is. They can continue to train. It's just standing.
Yeah, and let me ask you, because I guess, let's say you were president. Let's just say you're president. President Slaton, okay? Probably be a Democrat, I'm guessing.
I got to laugh, or you got to laugh actually on that one.
Well, at least she's wearing a mask. You can't see the smile. But but anyway, let's say a president of the United States, right? Following what you're laying out here, that essentially cannot deploy unless there's an declared act of war by the Congress, right? So taking it all the way through, let's put the Guard aside. Should the same rule apply for all the military forces in your view? So
Yes,
the
sir.
president should not be able to send anybody over. So President Bush could not have sent anyone over. Is that right?
He should have petitioned Congress
And
to
I know
vote
what
on
you
that.
should, I know what you
Well, he
think you should have. What I'm asking you is, where you're, what you're trying to do here, where it's the law, where it followed, in your view, properly, then President Bush, because that's when the war started, the modern war. So President Bush would not have been able to send anybody to Iraq or Afghanistan because the Congress never voted. To our, you learn something every day. I mean, you and I. So Congress never declared war. And so were the Slaton law to be the law of the land, truly, then President Bush could never have sent anyone to Afghanistan or Iraq.
Well, it is the Constitution. I mean, all this
Oh,
bill,
I
that's
know.
why it's so
I'm just-
simple.
So I'm asking
Yeah.
you, in your view, he should not have sent anyone to Iraq or Afghanistan,
Unless he got Congress to declare war. Yeah, that's right.
which, again, Congress that did not declare war, so you believe that President Bush should never have sent any military forces to Iraq or Afghanistan, is that correct?
He should not have used his executive power to circumvent the Constitution. That's right. But so no, he shouldn't have sent, because he shouldn't.
Because
the
Congress-
Constitution should be used in good times and bad times.
Because Congress did not declare war.
Because Congress did not declare.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm sorry, Mr. Lopez?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. By the way, thanks a lot for calling me last week on Thursday. I think we sat in your office for a while and talked about this bill. And I certainly understand your point of view, and it got me to thinking that it's amazing how Google can really bring you up to speed, remind you of things that you hadn't thought of in 20 years. I got out of the military in 1984, and believe me, I've not been a student of it since, other than my son and my grandson, and actually two grandsons are actually active duty right now. But it got me kind of doing a little bit of research. I just got a couple of quick questions, and I don't know that you'll have the answers, but if you can comment to it or help me understand, what dialogue or thoughts you might have had around these issues, and then perhaps between now and the time that it makes it to the floor, if it does, that we can give some level of discussion around it. I see this, I know that you laid it out kind of like the Constitution says, therefore we shouldn't unless, fill in the blank on all this stuff, finish the sentence. For me, it really becomes an issue of readiness or national readiness across the board, whether it's hurricane preparedness in the coast or fighting a war in Afghanistan or anywhere else in the world. I do know that there's the total Army force concept, which has kind of been the concept that's been embraced by all military forces on how deployment will be, managed. It doesn't really address whether it should be by congressional or non-congressional action, but it says how the forces, armed forces are going to be managed so that there can be a shifting of manpower and readiness to make sure that at the point of deployment, we're sending our troops with the able-bodied head count that's necessary to accomplish the mission. I mean, at the end of the day, personally, whether it's constitutionally driven or not, we owe it to them to make sure that we send them with the resources available to accomplish the mission. It should be a defined mission, and it should have all those parameters around, what a good mission is all about. When I was in the military, I was a non-commissioned officer, so I didn't talk a whole lot of strategy. That was Representative Tenderholt's job to get strategy defined and then go out there and deploy it. We just took the orders and ran with it. Have you had any dialogue with anyone about that particular concept and how the military, how the branches are all trying to figure out a way how they can, if you will, blend the forces to be able to make sure that that our readiness is at its highest level when needed?
Some conversations, probably not specifically to that, but close. But the idea, this doesn't affect our mentality towards readiness. The idea of training, continuing to make the Texas National Guard the best there is, the ones that people can depend on when they're in trouble. That mentality stays in place, ready to go, ready to kick tail at a moment's notice. But all this does is just kind of holds the brakes and says, Congress, follow the Constitution, and we'll go get them. That's all it is. It's just about when we go. That's it. The mentality of training, being ready, still stays there.
Yeah, but and I understand what you're saying, but the reality of it is it all starts with the numbers. If you don't have the numbers in the right slots to do the mission, to accomplish the mission, you're in trouble regardless of training. Certainly training makes a big difference, and there's no question about that. But if you don't have the numbers, and it just seems like, going back to my day, and I hate to be reminiscing so much as I'm sitting up here, we had the draft in the late 60s, I enlisted not because I was as brave as I was wanting to enlist so that I could have some level of choice when I got in. So I enlisted, or else I would have been drafted very soon. We don't have that anymore. And so readiness has become, I think, a central issue within our military forces. And I think what they've done is come up with this concept of, if you will, sharing the talent, sharing the bases of folks within their specific services. And so I would encourage you to kind of read through that, kind of setting aside the, what order would be used to get them to go to war. Because if it's a just engagement, I'm more inclined to say, let's engage if it's a just engagement, rather than to say, hey, listen, let's make sure that we have the proper debate. Oftentimes, debate in Congress can lead us to the right thing, and oftentimes not. So I'm more concerned about making sure that our military forces have the readiness capacity, and that this doesn't jeopardize it in any way. And I think once studying the total Army Force concept that I'm referring to, you'll kind of get a sense of, I believe that the different branches are working towards some sort of a combined effort, and that would definitely include the Texas Army National Guard.
Okay. Well,
I mean, and so this could, and I guess the point that I'm making is, would this exclude them from that concept that the military is putting together? I don't know that you know the answer, but if you can find that for me or address it in a way, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir, I will. I'll look at more on that. I do want to say mixed with readiness, right? There's also political blowback, because if someone's going to mess with the readiness of the Texas State Guard, because we say honor the Constitution, a state delegation in D.C. and voters of that state, they would seek immediate political retribution if the president used the issue of National Guard funding as a political, trick. So I don't think it's a serious threat that someone would pull funding, because we want the readiness. Plus, our enemies are watching, and if they see us, trying to hurt one National Guard with their funding or whatever, they're watching that, and that means when they pull that funding, we're less ready. So the idea is keep us training, keep us ready, and just follow the Constitution to declare war. But thank you, sir. I'll look more.
Thank you.
Hold on a second. Can you all hear back there? I feel like his mic is not on. Can you hear him okay back there? Yeah? Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. Representative Irvin Hawkins?
No, that's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Lopez?
Representative Slaton, have you ever served in the military?
No, ma'am, I have not.
Okay. Do we, Mr. Chair, do we have any resource witnesses?
We have any resource? Let me see. Well, we have some witnesses, but, and so we don't have any formal resource witnesses. We may, should we hear from the witnesses that are going to come up? Maybe they can.
Yeah, I'd like to hear. I want someone who has had experience in this. I'm just concerned about trying to tell our leadership who can go to war and who can't. And I just need a little bit more.
Well, we're not going to vote on the bill today. I can tell you that. But this is a very important bill, and I appreciate you bringing it before us, by the way.